Good evening, Florida House Democratic Leader Fentress Driskell here. I hope that you are doing well and that your week is off to a great start. It's hard to believe that it is Tuesday. I have a friend of mine who always says it's quite a month we've been having this week. And that's kind of how I feel today. We're only 2 days into the week, or technically three, I guess. And my goodness, it has been so busy. So, want to check in with you. How are you? I love to hear from you in the comments. So make sure that you check in throughout the live stream and of course ask your questions, etc. So this is, I think, the third week back from since legislative session. Um, and my goodness, it's been so busy. Already I've been traveling all over the state, connecting with people. It's been amazing. I got to visit with the Democrats in Sarasota, in Sumter County. Did y'all know that there are Democrats in the villages? There are. I got to visit with them live and in the flesh. And let me tell you something, they are organized, they are fired up. It was really quite remarkable. I got to go and keynote the gala in Polk County and visit with the Democrats there, which was really nice. Polk County is where I grew up. So it's always very special to go back to the community that helped raise you. And as I've been traveling the state and talking to people, I can tell you that the energy feels very different leading into the election for 2024 than it did back in 2022. People are fired up. I even got to meet people who moved here recently from out of state, and they're here, they're Floridians by choice, and they want to participate and be engaged in the dialogue that we have in our state about politics and the policies that get passed. And I really love it. I love hearing their stories and hearing why it is that they wanted to come to Florida at a time where, frankly, we've been in national news for some rather extremist policies. And we're going to talk about one of those policies tonight. But it's been a true encouragement to me to connect with people, to hear their questions about what's happening in the legislature, and to also get their feedback about the Florida that they want to see going forward. And as I gave these keynote addresses at these different events, what was interesting to me is that the folks who invited me at each one, even though they had, like a different topic or theme maybe that they were dealing with for purposes of their gala, they all wanted me to talk about hope and to give some hope to the people and to give some inspiration. And I'll tell you, that's the one thing that I have in spades. I actually feel more optimistic about Florida's future, maybe than I have in a really long time, which makes me sound like I at one point was not optimistic, but I guess I always have been. And it's not because of, elected officials, and it's not because of anything else. It's because of you all. It's because of you out there and what I hear from the people in terms of the future that you want. And because the people want this future, the people want a future where every Floridian has the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. I know that we're going to get there. And with the energy that I'm feeling on the ground leading into 2024, I think it's possible. In fact, to prove to you how much I think it's possible, I brought my little mug tonight. Can you read that? Believe in change. This is one of my favorite mugs. I'm sipping on some herbal tea, rose-scented herbal tea, and I am ready for you. So why don't we go ahead and get into it, what we came here to talk about tonight. So every Thursday, there's always the chance, I guess technically any day, but on Thursdays in particular, there's a chance that the Florida Supreme Court will issue rulings on cases that it has under consideration. And this Thursday, there are a couple of really big decisions that we're anticipating. The court has until April 1st to rule on these cases. So technically they may come out on Monday. But if the court follows tradition, we'll have answers to these two big cases coming out on Thursday. Let me tell you about them. They are cases on ballot initiatives. So in Florida, we have a process whereby the people can actually do the hard work to put a question about Florida's Constitution on the ballot, and we can all vote on it. We can actually all vote to amend our Constitution. I think that this is a great process because what can happen is if one party is in control, or maybe, if one party's in control and the people feel differently about an issue, it can be very difficult to get a bill passed that reflects what the people want. We've seen this, for example, with common sense gun legislation. Overwhelmingly, people want universal background checks. I mean, it is not even a question. Republicans, Democrats, and independents all want that. And yet in the legislature, the Republicans are in charge. They see gun reform as a very partisan issue. And so they refuse to move on it, even though that's what the people want. Well, ballot initiatives are a way that you can kind of circumvent that partisanship Or could you imagine a situation where maybe you have a view or an opinion that neither party really holds, and you want to see policy go through, and you can't get somebody in the legislature to pass it? You could go forward and put forth a ballot initiative. Now, ballot initiatives are expensive. You have to collect, hundreds of thousands of signatures on petitions that have to be verified in order to get your constitutional question or the amendment on the ballot. But it is a way that we have access to direct democracy in Florida. And that's a little unique. Not every state has that. So there are two ballot initiatives that we're watching as we head into the 2024 election. The first is Amendment 3. That's the marijuana legalization initiative, and it would make recreational marijuana legal in the state of Florida. The next is Amendment 4, limit government interference with abortion, and that would protect constitutionally the right to have access to an abortion. So these amendments are citizen-led ballot initiatives. And like I mentioned, it allows citizens to have more of a direct voice in our system of government, and it lets the voters decide. Now, only 18 states, including Florida, provide the opportunity for initiated constitutional amendments like we do. And it's a really special process. Now, what happens is that if you collect all the petitions, you do the things to kind of qualify for the ballot, then that language has to go before the Florida Supreme Court, who has to decide whether or not that language should be allowed on the ballot. Is it misleading to voters? Is it clear enough? Will it confuse voters? Will voters understand what it is that they're voting for when they see that language on the ballot? Should the Supreme Court say yes, then each of those amendments needs a 60% vote in order to become law, in order to pass. So, it's amazing to me. I know they're banning all sorts of books in Florida, but Floridians can still read. And we understand the threats to rights in our state. And we know what it means to take our destiny into our hands and push for the change that we want to see. Remember how we started off? Believe in change? Oh, you better believe it, because the people are wanting it. They are demanding it. And I believe that they're going to vote accordingly this November. So, according to the Florida Constitution, the justices on the Florida Supreme Court have until April 1 to rule on the amendments. So these decisions typically get released on Thursdays at around 11 a.m. And that's why I keep telling you, I'm really watching to see what happens this Thursday. In fact, every Thursday since oral arguments, I've been on pins and needles trying to wait to see what the decision would be. And we've talked about that on this live stream some, that I was actually in the room at the Florida Supreme Court while they were considering the ballot initiative language for the abortion amendment, or the Yes on 4 amendment is how we like to talk about it. And it was just fascinating. The justices were asking questions, but there's one who I thought got it right. And he said, if this ballot initiative language is a sheep, we need to determine, or wolf, we need to determine whether it is a wolf in sheep's clothing. In other words, will this language mislead the people? I think it's actually very straightforward language, and it's not misleading at all. So I can't wait to see what the Supreme Court says. So they don't have to necessarily stick to that schedule, but typically they release these opinions on Thursday. So on Thursday, we're going to be on high alert. So Floridians have taken charge of this opportunity because they feel the majority has been working against their best interests. These amendments show us the priorities of the Floridian people, making these upcoming decisions vital. And I think it's worthwhile pointing out that Floridians on both sides of the aisle, as well as independents, worked so hard with determination to qualify both amendments for the ballot this year. This is not a Democratic thing. This is not a Republican thing. This is a Floridian thing. And it is something that is almost, unique to us, because not that many other states have this opportunity to have the people directly participate in our democracy and say what it is that they want, get that on the ballot, and give us all a chance to vote for it. It's really very cool. So it's also going to be up to voters of all political affiliations to see that these measures pass. No one party or the independents have enough to make up 60%. So that necessarily means that it's going to take a diverse coalition of voters, diversity in thought, right? Like diversity in opinion, diversity in affiliation, to get these measures across the finish line. So I'm excited to see that. With respect to abortion, actually, 1 out of 8 voters nationwide say that abortion is their most important issue for their vote in the 2024 election. So let's get this straight. Abortion is on the ballot no matter what. We must vote to elect legislators who are ready to defend our reproductive freedoms because we saw how easily those can be taken away once Roe versus Wade got repealed. So that's a little bit about the ballot initiative process in Florida. You might remember some of the prior ballot initiatives, like back in 2018, there was also, it was known as Amendment 4, which was trying to give returning citizens, those who were formerly convicted felons, the right to vote. We've had Forever Florida, which was one to protect our environment. We've had amendments on smaller classroom size. So maybe those will kind of help jog your memory about the ballot initiative process if you've been in Florida for some time. So we'll see what happens with this one. And then oral hearings. Oh, yeah, there was something else that was like a landmark thing today, which was that the United States Supreme Court heard oral arguments on the case for mifepristone. And I hope I'm saying this right. But that is a drug that the FDA had already approved when it comes to medications that are most commonly used for abortions in the United States. Also, oftentimes that's a medication that is prescribed in miscarriage management. So it's not always just about abortion. There are reasons why a pregnant woman might need that. So we could expect the Supreme Court to rule on this in the summertime. But what's interesting to me about it is that it all seems kind of politically motivated because honestly, this is a medication that has been used for decades. So it's important for people to note too that access to mifepristone remains unchanged unless the court's ruling actually overturns the FDA approval. But it's amazing. Like polling shows that 2/3 of Americans haven't really been tracking this, don't know anything about this hearing. And so I guess what's concerning to me is that there are people who have counted on this medication as part of their access to healthcare, and now it could be taken away, and they actually don't even know that the Supreme Court is in the process of reviewing this. I wonder if any of you have been tracking this story and watching what's been happening in the Supreme Court. But I think this is something that we need to raise awareness around, and have conversations about it because we're really living in a time that feels very unique. This is a time where we are watching courts actually restrict our rights. Typically, the role of the court has been to protect our rights. They interpret our rights per the Constitution. But we're living in a world where the courts seem to have become comfortable with people having fewer rights today than they did yesterday. And I think that should make all of us uncomfortable. And these are conversations we need to have with our family members, with our neighbors, making sure that people feel educated and informed, but then also empowered to know what to do about that when they go to the ballot box, because elections have consequences. So like I mentioned, this is a medication that's been used for over 20 years and it has a track record to prove it. So not only could this decision impact abortion rights, it undermines the FDA's expertise and the ability to make decisions based on data with a non-partisan opinion solely focused on the safety of the American people. The consequences of this case also could impact and stifle medical innovation. It could upend the country's drug approval process and put every approved medication in the political crosshairs. And I got to tell you, we don't want that and we don't need that. We do not need politicians looking over families' shoulders trying to say what's best for you. That doesn't make any sense. You deserve the right to make your own healthcare decisions. These are very personal and private decisions of the home and the heart, and they really should be left up to individuals. And we need the government to respect our medical privacy and respect the decisions that we need to make. So undermining drugs that have already been approved by the FDA with claims that are not based on science, it's very concerning to me. And I think it should be concerning for us all. And Again, I try to talk about these issues in a nonpartisan way. That's important to me because family planning is not a red issue or a blue issue, right? Like it's a personal issue. And I'm also feeling concerned because we saw what happened in Alabama with IVF, where you had the Alabama Supreme Court basically put a ban on in vitro fertilization. And so to me, it's more of an issue of extremism versus those of us who just want our freedoms protected. And I'm very concerned that extremists won't stop at abortion, right? They won't stop there. They've shown us that they will come for our freedoms, even with respect to in vitro fertilization and family planning. So, and then even the right to use contraception could be at risk. So, again, we have to stay educated, informed, but more than that, we have to be empowered to know what we can do about these things. And that means we have to be prepared to elect candidates who reflect our values. That's very important because that is the only way to preserve these freedoms. And so we should have the right to decide how and when we want to have babies. And again, politicians should have nothing to do with this. So, one more time, access to mifepristone, hope I'm saying that right, remains unchanged, but it's yet another instance of the government overreaching into our private lives, into our personal decisions, and trying to decide what is best for us. So, what's been on your minds? You know that I always like to hear your stories, and I invite you to share those with me. You can always do that on our website at venturesforflorida.com. You can also email us at yourvoice@venturesforflorida.com. We love to hear from you. So, in terms of what's up next for me this week, actually, the Hillsborough County Democrats are having their Spring Fling event, which is another fun gala, and I get to speak there soon and visit with lots of friends who I haven't seen since I've been gone for 2 months from legislative session. My goodness, it's really amazing to be able to serve the community in this capacity as a state representative. But I'll be honest, it's tough because it takes us away from our districts and our home communities. And so it feels like there's a lot that we miss out on. So being back, I love to just jump right in and get out there with the community, check in on folks, see what's been going on, and try to, help out in any way that I can. So that is what's coming up next for me. And then it's going to be a really busy summer. We started these live streams back in March. I want to say it was March 9th. I remember the day because it was very important to me to do this. And the big reason why was at the time the governor was doing his State of the State address, where he stands up and despite the fact that he has completely sacrificed the state for his own ambition when he was running for president, despite the fact that he has done nothing to address the property insurance crisis and that Florida continues to become too expensive for so many Floridians, despite the fact that he has refused to support the expansion of Medicaid, which would grant access to nearly 1 million Floridians who need access to health care. Despite all of that, we knew it, that he would stand up there and say that the state of the state is strong. Well, maybe I agree with him on one thing, and is that the people of Florida are strong, but what he has done to our state is absolutely inexcusable. And I wanted to be able to have a forum to talk about that and to share that information with you because probably many people don't know that the governor gives the State of the State address. And out of that, we've been able to create this space where we come together every Tuesday and talk about the pressing issues that are happening in our state. Oftentimes, we'll have great guests. I think most recently we had Representative Anna Escamani from Orlando, and she was able to participate in a legislative update with me. We've had Fred Guttenberg, who is the parent of 2 children, including Jamie, who was murdered in the Parkland massacre. We've been able to talk about abandoned African American cemeteries and one family's quest to really understand its roots through Florida history. So we try to get into some good issues here, some good topics, make sure that you feel informed, but keep in mind that this space is also about empowerment. And I know from visiting with folks around the state and really even around this country that right now there are a lot of people who are feeling unseen by their government. They feel that they don't matter. There was a statistic that I learned recently, and it said basically to the effect that Americans believe that if they like pestered a company enough, like if they made enough noise, they could get that customer to pay attention to it as its customer. Like around 60% said that. But only 4% said that they thought that they could get their government to care about them and to pay attention. And that is a statistic that absolutely broke my heart. And out of those conversations, out of that inspiration to figure out, okay, what can we do to let people know that they are seen and heard? How can we convene a space? How can we hear people's stories? How can I take those stories and allow that to inform me as I go about my work as a legislator? All of that was very important to me. And so we were able to start these live streams. So this is our space. It's not just my space. It's our space. It's our opportunity to come together and to talk about the issues that matter most to us. So it was very important to me tonight to make sure that you know about these ballot initiatives. Amendment 3, which would legalize recreational marijuana in the state of Florida, and yes on 4, Amendment 4, the ballot initiative that would protect our access to reproductive freedoms. So let's just say that tomorrow or on Thursday, the court rules that both of these initiatives can stay on the ballot. Then what? What do we do? Well, that is when we have to spring into action. We have to make sure that we are having good conversations with our friends and our neighbors and making sure that they know these initiatives are on the ballot and that they show up to vote. That's very important. There's a concept that we talk about in political circles called relational organizing. But if I could really break it down and make it super simple, what it says is that statistically speaking, your friend, your brother, your cousin, your auntie, whomever, they're much more likely to vote if you ask them to vote than if a stranger does. So I can ask them to vote until I'm blue in the face. And you can see I like the color blue, right? Love blue. I can ask them to vote until I'm blue in the face, but they are much more likely to vote if someone that they know asks them. So that means that we all have and share in a responsibility to talk to the people that we know and to make sure we ask them to vote and then follow up and make sure that they actually did it. That is what it is going to take in order to protect our freedoms at the ballot this fall and make sure that our friends show up to vote. Now, by the same token, what happens if on Thursday we get the news that the Supreme Court is not going to protect our freedom and particularly not going to allow Amendment 4 on the ballot? Well, friends, that is also when we must spring into action because it means that our work just got a little bit harder, but it's not insurmountable. It's not possible. That is where it becomes even more important to make sure that we are supporting good candidates who reflect our values. And then we have to push for overwhelming turnout at the ballot box this November to send a message and make it clear that we care as much about our freedoms. We care more about our freedoms than they care about blocking them, right? We have to show up for ourselves. We have to show up for the women in our lives. We have to show up and make sure that we are protecting our freedom at the ballot box by electing elected officials, by supporting candidates who are going to do that once they are in office. As a legislator, I get to push with this little finger. I get to push a red button or a green button on every bill. Red means no, green means yes. We all have that same opportunity. And it is important that we ask questions of the people who are seeking our vote. And it is important that we understand where they are on all issues. And I would submit to you this fall that it's very important to know where they are on Amendment 4. Because like I mentioned at the top of the live stream, I'm concerned that when it comes to these extremist policies, that they won't stop at abortion. I think it's also important to mention to you that when we dealt with the 6-week abortion ban, which was in the 2023 legislative session, the opposition to that bill was bipartisan. There were Democrats and Republicans who voted against it. It was only the folks who were in favor of that most extreme policy, which at 6 weeks, most women don't even know that they're pregnant. So it's basically an outright ban. It was those who were only in favor of that very extremist policy who voted for it. But there was bipartisan opposition to it. meaning that there were people in both parties who understood that these are very private decisions that should be left to families, and it should be left to that person's um, you know, particular personal opinion, and it should not be left to politicians. So I just wanted to uplift that too, because I think there's so many out there who want to try to make this a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. And it's like, no, it's a human issue. It's a family issue. It's a Floridian issue. So let's always make sure that we talk about it in that way and that we call people into the conversation, not exclude them. So that really runs through everything that I had for you this week. I just want you to, be prepared and watch what happens on Thursday. I'm sure as the opinions drop, should they drop on Thursday, I'll share more information on social media about it. Because I know you're leading very busy lives and you might not be tracking every day what the Florida Supreme Court is doing, but they have some really big decisions that they're about to make that could impact all of our futures. And I want to make sure that you have that information. So thanks for tuning in. As always, if you like this content, if you like what we're doing here, please invite your friends to this space. We talked about relational organizing, right? People are much more likely to participate if they hear from you that this is a space that they should join. And always remember that I love to hear your stories. So definitely share those with me. You can also share those through our social media pages. So feel free to do it that way if that's more comfortable for you. Feel free to share this content. And of course, share it and also like our social media pages so that you can get notifications about when we go live. So that's all I have for you this week. I'll give you back a little bit of time. We're ending, I think, about 3 minutes early, but hopefully I'll get to see you next week where we will continue the conversation. Thanks so much, and everybody take care.